All right. Well, I'm so excited to be here with Lea Pearson. She's the author of a book that I think is just amazing, Body Mapping for Flutists, what every flute teacher needs to know about the body. And I'm also very excited because this is the very first interview on my Flutist Pioneers.
Yay.
Yay! Thank you, Lea, for being my first interview. This is going to be all about conversations with creative flutists who put their own spin on things and explore uncharted territory. So, Lea, if you don't mind, I just want to dive in and start finding out a little bit of the backstory behind how this book came about, because it is really helpful, and I'd love to know your thought process behind it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm going to actually back up for 1 second and start with my name because people are confused about how to pronounce my name. And actually, I have nothing to do with it. It was what my mother decided. And because I love the ocean so much, I like to say it's Lee rhymes with sea. So I
Hey.
just throwing that out there because it's confusing. People don't know. So there
Well,
it is.
I love that. Lee rhymes with C. I'm a sucker for rhymes.
Yeah, and when I was in grammar school, they used to chant at me, "Lee, Lee, chickadee, riding on a bumblebee." Whatever that meant, I don't know. So anyway, back to your question about my book. I have to say, first of all, that everything I've done has been inspired by my teachers. I had two amazing teachers that helped me get out of the pain that I was in for 30 years. I mean,
Hmm.
it started when I was 18 in college, and I didn't really start getting serious help till I was 45. So the Barbara Conable was the person who started body mapping, and that was in about 1996. I happened to be studying with her. Had moved to Columbus to get my doctorate at Ohio State. And I happened to be studying with her at the time when she developed this whole concept that musicians could teach other musicians how to use their bodies, that they didn't necessarily have to go to an Alexander Technique teacher or, spend years and years in therapy or, work with a physical therapist. There were a lot of things that we as musicians understood about the nuances of how we move and what we have to do when we practice and how we play that nobody else is really going to get, because we spend years and years and years trying to figure out how to do this. So so that was the first thing. And my second teacher that really influenced me was my Finnish teacher, Liisa Ruoho, who was from Helsinki. And I went to workshops with her off and on in the States for several different summers. And finally just said, I'm going over there. And I got a Fullbright to go study with her in 98. So all of that is sort of the foundation for what I've done. And I hear their voices in my head all the time when I'm teaching. So when it came to writing deciding on a dissertation or document for my DMA, I said, I think I really want to try to put all this stuff into words. And there was only one book about body mapping out at that time, and that was the one that Barbara Conable had written, What Every Musician Needs to Know About the Body. And I thought, well, we sure as heck need something, us flute players, because we're a mess. And I really thought, who do I want to address it to? And I thought probably the most useful way to do it would be to address it to teachers. Because while performers might be a little, I don't know, because it was still so new at the time, I thought if teachers can get tools to help their students, this would be really exciting for them. So I started writing. It took me many months to write that. And then, of course, once it was finished, then I had to figure out, well, how do I make this accessible to the regular population, not the academic population? So it was a different kind of a dissertation. It wasn't research based in the traditional research. It's very practically experience based. And I just took everything I know and tried to write it down.
Well, I think it's so powerful that you addressed it specifically to teachers because the amount of ripple effects, as soon as a teacher really understands how a flutist can use their body well, then all of their students are going to benefit from that.
Yeah.
So that has
Yeah.
such far reaching impact and continues to do so.
Yeah. Have you seen benefit with your students in the ways you've been able to help them?
Oh my goodness, yes. Now, I was fortunate enough to take Alexander Technique a couple of semesters when I was in my undergrad
Mm-hmm.
at CU Boulder,
Mm-hmm.
and some life
Oh, we have
changing.
great teachers in Boulder.
Yes, yes. Life changing things for me. I definitely had flutist injuries of, a variety of
Yeah,
limiting, constricting, tension filled habits that I
yeah.
started out with. And so I've always had an interest in this. But one thing I love about your book is how it breaks it down to very specific things that flute
Mm-hmm.
players can do. And, I have to just kind of show how cool the format is in this book. I love that it's not just, like you said, it's not just for academics, it's not just packed full of so much information that you don't even know what to do
Yeah.
with it. It's really accessible and user friendly and kind of plenty of room for notes in the margins. So I just I could rave about all of the
Oh,
topics that you cover in
well,
the book.
that's great. I'm really so happy that you like the format because I realized after, going back to academia after having been out of school for a long time and then coming back at age 45 to get my doctorate, I was like, I don't read the way I used to. I need a lot more visual stuff. And I also realized that I'm a kinesthetic learner. So staring at a bunch of print just doesn't do it for me. So I often will say to people when they buy the book, just put it in the bathroom and read, 2 pages at a time and then go try it all out. Don't read it like a book because you can't. And so that's the format that I designed. And then when I actually, after about 6 years, took it to a publisher, GIA is my publisher, and they took that format and just redesigned it to make it a little more slick, a little nicer. Yeah.
Well, I love the interactive feel, and these exercises are things flutists can come back to again and again and again. I
Oh,
actually
for sure.
would love to hear you talk a little bit more about one of my favorite topics, which is the AO joint. Um,
Yes.
I've been fascinated with this forever, and I'll let you speak to it, but I'll just mention briefly. I think it's kind of magical how when those neck muscles are free and you have head balance and neck freedom, that not only can you know, feel better physically, but you have better access to mental clarity. I've even had students be able to play with more expression and more free spinning vibrato just from loosening up these neck muscles. So anything you'd like to say about that, I'm all ears.
Yeah. Do you know why that is?
Oh, please enlighten me.
Well, think about a snake. How does a snake move? Head first, right?
Hmm.
This is a principle of movement for all vertebrate animals, that the head, and this is what Alexander actually articulated so beautifully, the head always leads and the rest of the spine follows. So if there's any tension in the muscles here, around that joint or in the neck, the entire spine is going to be constricted. It's going to be shortened. And that means that everything else, which is basically everything, the rest of your body is connected to your spine. Spine is the core of everything we do. It means your arms are going to be constricted. Your breathing is going to be constricted. Your leg movement and hip joint movement is going to be constricted. So that's why I think in Alexander technique, they always start with freedom here. Yeah, and it can totally change. I mean, you can hear my voice change when I get tense in there versus when I allow it to be free. And so that ease and freedom is completely natural to human beings. It's just something we lost. But you watch any child under 5, they all have it. You had it when you were under 5.
I remember, didn't
So
Alexander study babies and monkeys for freedom of
mm,
movement and natural
yeah,
engagement of the body?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I always keep on my desk, I have my 2 top vertebrae here on my desk. So I can show them at a moment's notice, and how we're just designed to glide here at these 2 little places on the top vertebra. And when you think about it, each of these little spots is probably less than half an inch.
Mm.
But the skull, the bottom of the skull has 2 bumps on it, and they glide right in there. All right. So when you think about his big old heavy head, which is like a bowling ball, being supported on these two tiny places, you start to wonder, how does that work? And then you realize that it has to be the cumulative effect of the entire spine that's supporting it. It's not just a couple of vertebrae at the top, but the support goes all the way down, basically to your sit bones and then to your feet.
Yes, that's one of the things I love about Alexander technique and about all the exercises in your book. Anything that can get us thinking about how long things are and in our entire body. So like you said, the cumulative effect of the spine.
Yeah.
And also, even when we're talking about fingerings and things, not just like cutting off our control right here, but thinking longer.
Yeah. Always going back
to
to the whole body. Always going back to the whole body as the context. Yeah. So one of the things I have to tell you, asked me about things that I figured out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things to do with the noodle that one of them I completely figured out by myself. The other one I just kind of adapted. But you know how people have those big foam rollers that they use for exercise?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're really hard, right? And so when you lie on one, like I like to lie on it, along the back of my spine like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have it just long enough so it supports my head and my hips. So the length of the noodle goes from here to here.
I love how you just had a skeleton to just whip out.
Well, there's a lot more bones over there. Yeah, and we got my buddy over here who's always there. So what I like about the pool noodle is that it's squishy. And when you lie on your back with your knees up, so you're just like this, basically, with your knees up, your arms relaxed, what happens is the noodle acts like a massage on your back muscles. And thinking about what I just said about how the spine gets compressed and constricted, what this does is massages the spine so it restores it to its natural curves. Which is what Alexander teachers do when they guide your head with their hands. They're communicating that energy to you. But we can do it ourselves. And if you just lie on this with your head supported and your hips supported for 5 minutes and just breathe, the noodle starts to get softer, which is actually your muscles getting softer. It can feel pretty hard at first. And it's restoring the full length of your spine. And then you stand up and you're just like, oh, I feel so much taller. Yeah. And then I don't know if you have this in your Alexander technique lessons, but when they do table work, one of the things they do sometimes is go under your shoulder blades and kind of scoop out all of this. Did you ever have that done?
No, I was in a group class, so we had some individual sessions, but not table work.
So there's this incredible thing they do where they kind of open up the whole back. And you know how as flutists, we often have muscle knots like right in here between the shoulder blade and the ribs. Oh my God, I just want to take a hot poker and get rid of that thing. And I could only afford one Alexander lesson a week. And I did that for 3 years. That's what saved my life. I had one lesson a week with Barbara Conable, and as she was developing all the body mapping stuff. So what I decided is that I tried a whole bunch of different things to try to undo that shoulder tension because it was killing me. I decided that if you put the noodle between your shoulder blade and your spine and then out on a diagonal, so like out like this, and I have a sheet that describes this, but out on a diagonal like this, then you can pull it out gradually, kind of like the Alexander teachers do that scoop. And every minute or so, you pull it out another inch and another inch. So you're lying on your back again, and you're like this, starting where the knot is, and then pulling it out a little bit at a time. Totally opens up that whole shoulder. Your arm is longer, the pain goes away, and then of course you have to do the other side to balance yourself out.
That is so smart. And it's reminding me we're in such a unique time period right now where we can't, reach through the computer screen and help our students with our hands. And then who knows going forward, even if we do return back to live, what the new etiquette is going to be.
Right. We don't want to have to.
Yeah, so there have to be exercises that students can do themselves, and that seems very accessible, user-friendly.
Yeah. And that's kind of one of the cornerstones of my teaching. A lot of my body mapping colleagues have also trained to be Alexander technique teachers. And I decided not to do that because I didn't want to be tempted to use my hands. And so what it's forced, that limitation has forced me to come up with all kinds of experiences to help people have that experience of freedom. Like just something as simple as jumping jacks. If you do 10 jumping jacks and then you just stand there, all of a sudden your body is like, woo, it's buoyant and upright and alive, and you feel completely different. And instead of going to an Alexander technique lesson, you can do that for yourself. Not that I don't have anything against Alexander technique. I love Alexander technique lessons, but I know that it's hard for some people to access them. And what we do in body mapping is really direct. It's everything we do is directly related to playing. So you can get immediate benefit from it.
Well, gosh, I love that idea of just something as simple as 10 jumping jacks can transform the way that you feel. And
Yeah.
I'm really into this word, psychophysiology. So everything that we do in our minds affects our bodies, and everything we do with
Yeah.
our bodies affects our minds. So just even the emotional freedom of doing 10 jumping
Yeah.
jacks is kind of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll go so far as to say it's even more than that. It's everything that you do is a combination of your experiences and your thoughts and emotions, and all of that affects how your body works. Like, as performers, we have a lot of positive and negative experiences, and sometimes those negative experiences, like a bad comment from a teacher or a peer who was really critical of you, or competition in school, something like that, that negative effect can live in our bodies because we're so self-critical, so judgmental. We're trained to be that way from day one. We are trained to criticize ourselves because that's what you do. You go into a lesson, your teacher tells you everything you do wrong, what you need to correct. You take that on and you go home and dutifully practice it, try to make it better, but every musician I know is completely self-critical, and it's almost a disease in a sense. So when that lives in your body, you can never quite find the freedom that you want. So we have to go back and figure out what those experiences are and create a different response to them, a different reality, a different story, so that we are not defined by those past experiences, because an experience is thoughts and emotions and feelings and physical reactions.
Yes. One of my favorite books to show my students and study with my students is The Art of Possibility by Benjamin and Rosamund Zander. And one of the sections towards the end talks about telling yourself wiser stories. It's exactly what you just described, going into those experiences and flipping the narrative and reteaching your response to those kinds of thoughts and memories.
Yeah, exactly. Reteaching the response. That's rewiring your brain. And what I love is that every day we're learning new things about neuroscience. And Barbara Conable had this, she was on the cutting edge here, because this body mapping is rooted in neuroscience. So you have neural networks in your brain that tell you how your body is put together. And if they're accurate, you're going to move pretty well. But if they're inaccurate, like you think, just talking about the AO joint, if you don't know where it is and you think it's back down here someplace, which is what a lot of people will say when you ask them. If you say, where do you think your head moves from? And they'll just look around and they'll say back here. They're never going to be able to have freedom at the actual joint because they don't know where it is. They have it mismapped, and they're trying to do all this stuff from there that should really be happening from up here. So that's the power, that's the neuroscience behind body mapping.
Gosh, that term mismapped. I find that so many of my students, I teach here in Texas, and a lot of the flutists have a strong background in marching band.
Yep.
Where they spend hours a day, days a week for years looking up at the drum major, and they start to feel like two things. One, standing up straight, is this very rigid thing, and then also that standing tall involves your chin up. and talk about mismapping, right? Can you speak
Well,
a little bit to
the
the
resultant
different?
whole body tension that comes with that,
Yes.
not to mention sometimes injury.
Yes. I think just some of the most simple, powerful changes I've seen have been when a flutist learns that chin up, looking up, up, up is not the elongation of the spine or the full
Exactly.
height, but
Or
your chin
or
is
chest
down.
up. Chest up is the same problem. I actually have a whole series of videos I did on Facebook Live a couple of years ago.
Oh,
That's
wow.
called "Your Mother Was Wrong: Why Sitting Up Straight is Bad for You."
Oh, I can't wait to see those. We'll be sure and put the links to those down below. Are those links available?
They're still on Facebook, but I haven't yet got all my Facebook. I've got like 200 Facebook videos up, and they're not organized on Facebook. So I'm trying to get them all uploaded to YouTube. But I'll see if I can get you the links to those. Yeah, because they're really fun. I like to have fun because humor is important, in learning.
Yes. Well, speaking of humor, I've also noticed with body mapping stuff, when it's time to take a break because there's too much tension and too much stress, if we can take a break and get to the point where the student laughs and then
Yes.
play right after the laugh, there's so much
Yep.
going right after that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It should be required. Humor should be required.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
So I
oh, go
go
ahead.
back to what you said about the ripple effect of working with teachers. Because I find it interesting that my book's been in continuous publication for 20 years. I first put it out in 2000. It's interesting to me that my instinct then was to work with teachers. And then I went much more into working just with performers. And now, especially in connection with the pandemic and everybody being online, I'm really focusing on what is the pedagogy? What is it that we're actually teaching in body mapping besides the anatomical content? How are we helping students access this knowledge? Because you can't just dump a bunch of knowledge on people. It has to be experiential, and that's the way I think I know research proves that's how people learn best. And so we have a tradition in studio teaching of the teacher telling the student what they need to know. And that is real old school. That comes back from centuries of teaching. And I believe, from what I've seen, the flutist, I work with a lot of different musicians, but more flutists than anything else. And 90% of the flutists that I see are overworking and trying too hard to make things right, and because we have created this culture that, number one, tells you that you're wrong. Number two, doesn't help you trust yourself or your own body. Because if you're young and vulnerable as a student, and your teacher tells you to do something that doesn't quite work for your body, most of us, especially young girls, and a lot of us have students of middle school age, early in high school, where we're still trying to form our identities. We're not likely to argue with the teacher. We're not likely to say, oh, that doesn't quite feel right. Or, we're often even not likely to report discomfort or pain. So we've created what I call is a toxic culture in traditional studio teaching. This is not to say that aren't a lot of fantastic teachers out there like you who actually know how to do this and have created their own methods, but we really have created a culture that I think is responsible for the epidemic of injury. 75 to 85% of injuries, 60% among high school students, 75 to 85 among professionals. And I'm not going to stand for it anymore. So that's why I want teachers to understand this is not just about, being a better teacher. This is about fundamentally changing the lens, and it's really a paradigm shift about how we teach, that we are not the dispensers of information. We are the people who facilitate the students' understanding and get them to experience it and articulate it and validate it and make sure that they know what they're doing with their bodies that works so they can do it again. And I'm getting very passionate about this stuff right now because I see it. Every single person that I work with has this problem, this issue of not trusting themselves.
Yes. I'm really big right now on what I'm calling emotionally intelligent practice.
Mm,
And I find that it's effective to just talk about the fact that all practice is trust building with yourself. All
mm, I
practice
love,
is leaps of faith, being vulnerable, trying things out, knowing that you can always try again, but then finding out what movements
yeah,
and gestures and thoughts and sounds are always going to feel good. And I
yeah,
definitely agree with you. Going toward what feels good instead of micromanaging and fixing and dissecting and freaking out about everything that feels bad is a
yeah,
much better way to go about it, to move towards freedom.
yeah. And how did you develop that way of thinking?
Oh my goodness, Lee. I think if there is a bad habit with physicality, mentality, emotional approach to practicing, I've had it. I've
Mm,
done it. I like you. I had a rock bottom with
mm,
injury and distress and anxiety, and there came multiple points actually where it was either find a new way or quit.
yep, yep,
And I love the flute and I love music, as I know you do. And so necessity is the mother of invention. You have to find a different way.
right, right, right. That's fantastic. And that's part of what makes you a wonderful teacher, because you know all the pitfalls, and people always talk about, folks like Julius Baker who were wonderful in their own way, but they couldn't explain anything. So people like us who have been through, I mean, I can't believe what a mess I was. I was in constant pain. My whole body was in constant pain at 45, which is, that's just wrong. So, and what I love is that when you start teaching this way, you keep coming up with more and more ideas. Your students give you ideas. It's a virtual circle
Yeah.
where you say something and then that you get something from the student, and then you think of it in a different way, and then you come back to your student in a different way, and you're just constantly growing and learning, and it's so exciting. And I remember the old days of teaching where you would be like, okay, I'm saying the same thing 50 times a day to kids, and that, and they're just not getting it. Why do I keep saying this? They're not getting it.
We are so on the same page. I feel like every single time I teach a lesson, I'm having a lesson. And then when I
Mm-hmm.
see that same student the following week, I know they're a different person and I'm a
Yeah.
different person. So it's a whole new ball game with whole new things to explore every
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. And when you think about, when you used to have lessons, how little of the lesson you actually absorbed
Yes.
and embodied, and that's why I have my students all record their lessons and watch the recording as part of their practicing, because and take notes and bring me questions every lesson, bring me new questions and bring me things you've learned, because they have to, the way the brain works, you have to go through that process of repetition and embodiment. And what you're saying about emotions, what we know about how the brain works, how we learn stuff, and stuff that has a heightened emotional experience for us gets into our long-term memory, gets embedded with us, and we learn that better. So whenever we can bring our emotions into what we're learning and make it joyful or whatever, or even, making up great stories about it, or about the music, whatever, it all will enhance the learning.
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. We are so like-mindedly. This
Yeah.
is great.
And I gotta say, one of the things that I've absolutely loved is finding so many teachers who either have already figured all this out or like dying to figure it out. So I have a teachers group called the Transformational Teacher Membership Group. And we meet every week, 3 times a month. And this is what we do. We talk about how we're teaching, the problems that we're coming up again. What are the body mapping strategies we can use to help our students? Because, everybody has a different problem with different students. We watch videos of students and talk about how can we help the student. And some of the teachers will actually play. The ones that are brave, they'll come in and play. We have master classes, and they'll get help with something that they're working on. Every time they get clarity on something that they're working on, that's then a gift to their students. And this is like the happiest moment of my week when I get to meet with these teachers. It's so fun and so exciting. And we're opening membership up again, so I can send you that information if so you can.
Yes, yeah, I'd love to include the information underneath this YouTube video and spread the word. That sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, I'd love to have more teachers because I know they're out there, and I know there's people who are
Yeah.
really considering and evaluating this whole thing that we're doing and how to make it better, how to reach our students better, especially across this stupid digital divide.
Yeah.
And what I love is that this way of teaching, where you are centering the body and focusing on the student, it doesn't matter where you're teaching. You could be teaching on a phone with no video at all, but if you are using your time to inquire into what the student is experiencing, what that feels like, what that sounds like, what are they noticing, what do they think might be interesting to try a different way, you don't have to hear everything. You don't even have to see everything. You can, if you get really good at inquiry with students, you can teach anywhere. And it's so empowering to both you and to the student, because you get amazing results that you wouldn't have gotten if you were relying on, oh, do I have the right mic or the right speakers or the right camera, which so many of us have tried to invest in.
Right. No, that word inquiry is so powerful. It's very much, give a man a fish, he'll eat for today. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime.
Yep.
I feel like every time we have that precious hour to interact with a student, or maybe half hour in some cases, that's our chance to empower them to use their own creativity, their own investigation skills,
exactly,
that they can always blaze a path forward without us.
Yes. And here's the kicker to that most people don't even think about. Whenever you tell a student what they're supposed to do, you are actually depriving them of the ability to do exactly what you just said. And why would we want to do that? Why don't we want them to figure it out for themselves? And it's just such a habit, because it's the way we were taught. It's in our DNA to try to fix what a student does and make it better. But if we just stop talking, stop telling, and ask questions, it's so much more powerful way of learning. I totally agree with you.
In studio class at UTA on Friday, we had this moment where I went on a bit of a ramble, and I got very passionate, and I said, I know what you want from me right now. I know you want tips. I know you want tricks. And that's not what we're doing right now. we're going to find that place where you can hear and listen and feel. And we had some really, really good moments in that class. So I'm so with you on that idea.
I love this, because the more I've done this, the more I realize this way of thinking about education is actually in my DNA, because my grandmother was one of the first people that brought Maria Montessori over to this country way back in the early part of the 1900s. My mother taught at a progressive school in Cambridge back in the 1940s, I guess, right before the war, during the war. And I went to Hampshire College, which was a brand new, very progressive college in 1970. I was in the first class there. We started a new college, and it was all about focusing on, what do you want to learn? What's important to you? And it doesn't have to be in the psychology department or in the history department. We can do all this interconnection stuff. And it's actually going gangbusters right now, because this is the kind of education that we need. And then, of course, Alexander was part of that whole education reform movement that happened in the early part of the 1900s with Dewey and Summerhill and all. The history of education reform is quite interesting, because it's over 100 years old. And then it kind of had a resurgence in the 70s, and then it kind of died away with all the testing and everything. And I think now it's starting to come back. This stuff is important.
Yes, it really is. And Lee, this has been incredible. I feel like you and I could talk for hours and not tire of this subject. But just to kind of wrap up for this conversation, As we're encouraging flutists to be creative, to blaze their own path, explore uncharted territory, what one thing would you want them to keep in mind as they go about their week of practicing flute and making music?
Oh, I love that question. I think for me, it always comes down to being curious. Why does this work? Why does this not work? I wonder if I tried it in a different way. And doing that in a non-judgmental way. So we're not criticizing ourselves. We're not feeling hopeless. We're not going, oh, you stupid idiot, you couldn't do that again. Just like, oh, wow, that didn't work. How interesting is that? I wonder what would happen if I did it this way. And for somebody asked me what my word for 2021 was, at the new year, I said, curiosity. That's what we need.
Oh, I love that. Trading judgment for curiosity is an incredibly
There you go.
concept.
That goes on your studio wall.
Yes, yes. Trade judgment for curiosity.
And that reflects your frog behind you.
Oh, yes. I love that frog.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Lee,
I'm so grateful to you, Terri. Thank you so much.
Yes, well, I hope this is the first of many conversations that you and I have.
You too. Yeah. All right. Well, take care. Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
Bye, Lee.
Bye.